The alarm in stall 3 first went off at 2:29 a.m. Exactly 2:29. It would go off again the following Tuesday at the same time. And that's when I started reviewing the forest camera. My name is Daniel Marsh. I'm 34 years old. Before this job, I worked loss prevention at a Walmart distribution center outside of Columbus, Ohio for 6 years. Before that, I did 2 years of campus security at Kenyon College. I've spent most of my adult life watching things that aren't supposed to move. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something before I get into what happened. I'm not someone who spooks easily. I'm not someone who fills in gaps with imagination. In loss prevention, in security work generally, you learn to be very precise about what you actually saw versus what you think you saw. Those are two different things, and the difference between them can cost someone their job or their freedom, or in some contexts, their life. I want to be precise here. I started working night security at the mile marker, 214 rest area on Interstate 70, just east of Zanesville, Ohio, in February of last year. The rest stop sits off the eastbound lane between two exits, neither of which leads to anything you'd call a town. The nearest gas station is 11 miles east. The nearest hospital is 23 miles west. If you've driven through eastern Ohio on 70 at any point in the last decade, you may have stopped there. White concrete block buildings, faded brown signage, a covered walkway between the men's and women's facilities, vending alcove on the east wall. It's maintained by the Ohio Department of Transportation, and the security contract is held by a private firm out of Columbus called Meridian Protective Services. I won't say anything negative about Meridian. They processed my paperwork quickly and the pay was fair. The posting was listed as overnight security officer, solo shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The job description was straightforward: conduct perimeter and interior walkthroughs every 60 minutes. Log all vehicle entries and exits. Respond to panic alarm activations. Maintain the incident log. Coordinate with ODOT maintenance staff if facilities issues arise. Radio into the regional dispatch center in Columbus at the top of every hour. There's one security office. It's a converted storage room on the west end of the men's facility, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. There's a metal desk, a folding chair, a space heater that works about 60% of the time, and a monitor bank that shows feeds from 8 cameras. Camera 1 faces the main entrance drive. Camera 2 covers the truck parking lot on the north side, which holds about 12 rigs comfortably. Cameras 3 and 4 cover the east and west ends of the main building exterior. 5 and 6 are interior, the vending alcove and the covered walkway. 7 is the women's restroom entrance. Camera 8 is labeled on the panel as forest/north, and it faces the tree line behind the rest stop, maybe 40 yards of open grass and then dark tree cover. That camera exists because there had apparently been incidents in prior years. People sleeping rough in the tree line, a few trespassing situations. The camera itself has a wide angle, but the resolution drops badly past about 25 feet. Anything beyond the first row of trees is essentially invisible on that feed. There are emergency panic buttons in 4 of the bathroom stalls, 2 in the men's room, 2 in the women's. When triggered, they send an alert to my monitor panel and to regional dispatch. Protocol is I respond in person within 3 minutes, announce myself outside the stall, wait for verbal confirmation or lack thereof, then use the master key override if there's no response. Standard procedure. In 6 months on that job, I activated the master key override twice. Once for a man who had fallen asleep in a stall, once for a teenager who had locked herself in and was crying and hadn't meant to hit the button at all. A typical night went like this. I'd arrive at 9:45, relieve whichever afternoon officer was there, usually a man named Terry, who was in his 60s and didn't talk much, which I appreciated. I'd do a full walkthrough, log the facility status, and settle in for the shift. Between 10 and midnight, there was usually some traffic. Families on road trips, truckers logging hours, occasional singles stopping for coffee from the vending machine. After midnight, it dropped off significantly. By 2 a.m. on most nights, there might be 2 or 3 trucks in the lot and no foot traffic at all. By 3 a.m., the silence was complete enough that you could hear the ventilation system cycling in the walls. That silence is something I want to describe carefully because it matters for what comes later. At 2 in the morning on Interstate 70, 30 miles from the nearest city, the rest stop exists in a kind of acoustic isolation that's hard to explain unless you've experienced it. The highway is always audible, a low, distant friction, trucks downshifting on the grade a mile east. But inside the building, or in the parking lot, there is a quality of stillness that most people never encounter. The overhead lights in the lot are on motion sensors, and they sometimes click off during long, quiet stretches, leaving only the emergency fixtures along the building face. On overcast nights, which is most nights in Ohio from October through April, there's no ambient light at all beyond the facility. The tree line to the north is simply a darkness inside a larger darkness. The first incident was a Tuesday in March. I'll tell you the time because the time matters. It was 2:29 a.m. The panic alarm for stall 3 in the men's room triggered on my panel. Not unusual on its own. People bump the button. People are disoriented after 6 hours in a cab. I noted the timestamp, radioed dispatch, walked out, announced myself. The room was empty. All 3 stalls open, windows sealed, utility closet locked. I logged it as a false activation and called it in. ODOT came out 4 days later. Their report said no fault found. They calibrated the sensor and left. I didn't think much about it after that. The following Tuesday, the alarm triggered again, 2:29 a.m. I pulled up the log from the prior week and looked at the timestamp 3 times. Not approximately the same, not roughly the same hour, the same minute, 7 days apart, same stall, same time. This time I stood inside the men's room in silence for 5 minutes. I turned the lights off, stood in the dark, and listened. Ventilation, a truck idling in the north lot, the hum of the hand dryer on standby. And then I heard the walkway door close, the heavy fire door connecting the covered walkway to the women's entrance. A pressured click, then a brief reverberation in the concrete. I know that sound well. I went around to the women's facility and announced myself. Empty. All stalls open. I walked the full perimeter. Nothing. What I didn't tell my supervisor when I called him the next morning, what I kept to myself, was that I had already reviewed the camera footage from both nights. No visible explanation for the door sound. Nothing on any feed around that timestamp. Except camera 8, the forest-facing camera. Both nights at 2:27 a.m., 2 minutes before the alarm. The same anomaly. A 2-second pixelation. Not a freeze, not a blackout. The specific kind of static that, in my experience, means something has moved very close to the lens. Close enough to disturb the infrared sensor. At 2:27 a.m. both Tuesdays, something had come close to camera 8. Over the following 3 weeks, I documented a pattern. And I want to be careful about the word I'm going to use, but it's the accurate word. The pattern was intelligent. Camera 8's field of view doesn't extend to the north corner of the building. There's a gap, about 8 feet, between its angle and the edge of camera 4 on the east exterior. If you knew the camera placements, you could approach from the forest, move along the north wall, and reach the men's room emergency exit without appearing on any feed. That exit is not alarmed when opened from outside. I reported it twice to my employer and once to ODOT. As of the last day I filed paperwork, it had not been corrected. During the 3rd week, a truck driver knocked on my office door at 3:10 a.m. He was in the north lot, had been awake with a bad tooth. He said he'd looked out his passenger window and seen someone standing at the tree line, still facing the building. He watched for maybe 30 seconds. Then it wasn't there. He said it didn't walk away. It was just there, and then it wasn't. He mentioned the ibuprofen, the bad sleep. He wasn't certain of what he'd seen. I pulled camera 8 for that timestamp, at 3:08 a.m., 2 minutes before he knocked. The same pixelation. 2 seconds, then clear. Whatever was standing at the tree line was standing exactly at the boundary of the camera's range. I reported everything to my supervisor. He referred me to the county sheriff's non-emergency line. A deputy took down the information. A patrol came by 2 nights later, at 11:45 p.m., well before the relevant window. shone a spotlight at the trees for 45 seconds, and left. 3 days after that, the same deputy called back. He mentioned, without apparent connection, that there was an active missing persons case in Guernsey County, 1 county east. A woman, mid-30s, missing 11 days. Her car had been found at a rest stop on I-70, mile marker 219, 5 miles east of my facility. He didn't suggest a connection. I didn't either. I said I hoped they found her. I kept the call out of my official log. I wrote it in my personal notebook, which I kept at home. 3 weeks after the first alarm, Thursday, 2:14 a.m., my walkthrough was running 14 minutes behind. Vending machine jam, trucker waiting on a refund. I was in the covered walkway when the overhead fluorescent in the center went out. Not flickered, went out. 4 seconds, then back on. In those 4 seconds, the walkway was lit only from the entrances at each end. The middle section was dark, and in that dark section, I saw a shadow on the wall. It was brief, the kind of brief where afterward you interrogate whether you actually saw it. The shadow suggested a person standing in the walkway, facing me, but the light from behind me was also throwing my own shadow forward, and what I saw may have been a distortion of that. That is one possibility. The other is what I felt. A specific physical response I've had only a few times in my life. A sensation of proximity, of mass, of something occupying the same enclosed space. I've felt it in a parking structure when someone was standing behind a column 20 feet away. I've felt it in a warehouse where I later found someone had been hiding. The light came back on. The walkway was empty. I stood still for about 20 seconds. Then I returned to my office. At 2:17 a.m., Camera 8 registered its pixelation event, and when I reviewed the feed, I noticed something I hadn't before. In the right-hand corner of Camera 8's frame, there is a partial view of the north wall emergency exit, just the edge of the door frame. At 2:17 a.m., in the moment of pixelation, that door appeared to be in a slightly different position than it was 1 second before and 1 second after. Not open, not visibly ajar, but different. I reviewed that frame 11 times. I have never been fully certain of what I saw, but I have never been able to explain it away either. I filed a formal incident report that week, a full written account of every documented anomaly with timestamps, camera footage references, the truck driver's verbal report, and my own observations. I submitted it to Paul Hennessy and CC'd the Meridian Regional Operations Manager. Paul called me 2 days later. He told me the report had been reviewed. He told me that Meridian appreciated my diligence and that the camera anomalies had been attributed to the age of the Camera 8 unit. It was apparently the oldest piece of hardware on the array installed during a prior contract in 2018. He said they'd added a Camera 8 replacement to the budget for next fiscal year. He told me the panic button calibration would be reviewed again. He did not mention the missing woman. He did not mention the north wall emergency exit alarm. He did not say anything about the pattern of timestamps. I asked him directly, "Did anyone look at the timestamp correlation?" He said he wasn't sure what I meant. I said, "The alarm activations, both on Tuesday, both at 2:29 a.m., he said that could happen with sensor drift in certain temperature conditions. He said the night temps in March in eastern Ohio can create consistent interference in low-grade electronics." I said I understood. I still work there. I want to be clear about that. I have not quit, and I'm not planning to quit. And I'm not telling this story because I'm afraid. I'm telling it because I'm precise about things, and there are elements of this that I cannot account for within the parameters of my training or my experience, and I think precision requires acknowledging that. The alarm activations in Stall 3 have not recurred since I filed the formal report. The Camera 8 anomalies have occurred 4 more times, always between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., always on the north-facing feed, always that same 2-second pixelation. The replacement camera has not yet been installed. The missing woman from Guernsey County, I checked the case once 3 months after the deputy mentioned it to me. As of that date, she had not been found, I do my walkthroughs at the same times every night. I log everything. I call in to dispatch at the top of every hour. On the overnight shift, the rest stop is quiet enough that you can hear a car door close from 200 feet away, and quiet enough that the sound of the walkway door, that pressured click and soft reverberation, carries clearly from one end of the building to the other. Some nights, standing at my desk doing log entries, I hear it. I always look at the clock. When I do, it is always the same time, and I have stopped checking the walkway.